I always thought my life would stay simple and uneventful. But now, at 32 years old, I realize how much my past changed me. My name is Alina, and I want to share the events that turned my world upside down when I was just 15. Back then, my family was small but happy. It was just me, Mom, and Dad, living in a cozy little house on Maple Street. Dad worked as a construction worker, and Mom managed finances for a local business. We weren't rich, but we had enough, and most importantly, we had each other. That all changed one tragic Tuesday morning. Dad had an accident at work, a terrible one, and just like that, he was gone. Nothing could have prepared us for the pain of losing him. Mom was devastated. She stopped talking, stopped eating, and barely looked at me. I felt like I had lost both parents in one day. I had to learn how to take care of myself quickly. 8 months later, something unexpected happened. One evening, Mom sat at the kitchen table, nervously stirring her coffee. "Alina, honey," she said, her voice shaky, "I have something to tell you. I've met someone. His name is Ethan, and he makes me happy." I had noticed the signs, her secret phone calls, dressing up more often, disappearing for hours, but hearing it out loud made my heart sink. Then, she said something that hurt even more. "Ethan and his daughter, Freya, will be moving in with us. We can be a family again." "But Mom, it's only been 8 months, I protested. It felt too soon, like she was replacing Dad. "I know, sweetie," she said, but this time her voice was firm. "Life must go on. Ethan is a good man, and Freya needs a mother figure." Ethan and Freya arrived a week later. Freya was a small girl with blonde pigtails and big blue eyes. She was the kind of child Mom always dreamed of, sweet, clingy, and in need of love. Mom gave her all the attention in the world, while I was left to the side. The shift in our family became clearer when Ethan's mother, Mrs. Henderson, came to visit. She was an older woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. The first thing she did when she met me was pinch my cheek, hard. "What a big girl you are," she said, but I could tell she didn't mean it kindly. From that day on, she treated me like an outsider. Ethan wasn't any better. He always found something wrong with me. If I dropped a glass or spilled something, he'd yell about how careless I was. He'd say I was a burden. The worst part, Mom never defended me. She was always too busy with Freya. To escape, I started spending more time at Mom's friend Madison's house. Mom often sent me there, saying, "Madison needs help with little Tessa today. You don't mind, do you?" I didn't mind. In fact, I loved it. Tessa was 5 years old, full of energy, and she adored me. She called me Gary because she couldn't say my name properly. We built blanket forts, had tea parties, and read books with silly voices. Madison was kind, always asking me about school and listening to my stories. Being there felt like being part of a real family again. Meanwhile, things at home only got worse. Mrs. Henderson practically lived with us, criticizing everything. "These walls should be eggshell, not cream," she'd say, and Mom would immediately run off to buy paint samples. She also had a habit of pinching my cheeks, scolding my posture, and picking apart my table manners. I felt invisible, forgotten, like I didn't belong in my own home. By the time I was 17, I had had enough. I refused to be treated like an outsider anymore. I wanted my own independence. That's when I decided to start working. I printed out flyers and put them around the neighborhood, offering to walk dogs. Mrs. Jasmine, an older woman from a few streets over, was skeptical. "Aren't you too busy with school?" "I can handle both," I assured her. "I'm responsible." She hesitated, then handed me her golden retriever's leash. "All right, let's see how you do. Max needs daily walks, $22 per walk." That was my first client, but soon, I had more. I also started running errands for elderly neighbors and officially became Tessa's after-school babysitter. For the first time, I felt like I had control over my life. I saved every penny I made, while other teens spent money on movies and snacks. I tucked mine away. After 4 months, I finally had enough to buy something I really wanted, a smartphone. It wasn't a fancy model, just a simple one on sale, but it was mine. It represented my hard work, my independence. The day I brought it home, I was so excited. I was in my room setting it up when Freya, now 9 years old and more demanding than ever, barged in. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at my phone. "It's my new phone," I said proudly. "I bought it with my own money." Her eyes widened with jealousy. Before I could stop her, she ran downstairs crying, "Daddy, Alina has a phone, and I want it." Ethan's heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. He didn't even ask me about it, he just walked in, took the phone from my hands, and gave it to Freya. "Daddy's got you covered, sweetheart," he said with a smile. I was furious. It wasn't just about the phone, it was about everything. That night, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. The next day, I told my English teacher, Mrs. Sutton, everything. I told her about Ethan's cruel words, about my mom ignoring me, and about how my phone had been stolen from me. She listened carefully, then took me straight to the principal's office. By that afternoon, my mother was called into the school. Continued as needed. When I first started working as a waitress, I didn't know much about the restaurant business. I was eager to learn, and over time, I absorbed everything I could: the fast-paced environment, the constant buzz of customers, and the teamwork it required. It all fascinated me. It wasn't just about taking orders and serving food, it was about creating an experience for the people who walked through those doors. Valentina, the restaurant owner, was a tough but fair mentor. She had been in the business for years, and she didn't hesitate to correct my mistakes or point out the small details I would have never noticed on my own. She taught me things that my college classes never covered, things like the importance of customer relationships, the hidden costs of running a business, and how to handle difficult situations with grace. Though she was strict, I appreciated her guidance. At the same time, I had my own small apartment, a modest place, but it was mine. It was my safe space, where I could relax, study, and be free from the judgment and criticism I had grown up with. It wasn't much, but it gave me peace. By the time I graduated with my business degree, I had already proven myself at the restaurant. Valentina recognized my dedication and promoted me to an administrative role. I took on more responsibilities, managing staff schedules, overseeing inventory, and handling finances. I loved the challenge, and with each passing day, I became more confident in my abilities. 3 years later, I had become an essential part of the business, handling much of the day-to-day operations. One evening, Valentina sat me down for an important conversation. "Hannah and I have been talking," she said. "We think it's time you become a partner. You know this place better than anyone, and we believe in you." Her words stunned me. I had spent so much of my life feeling like an outsider, someone who never quite belonged, and now, here I was, being offered a stake in something I had helped build. It was a defining moment for me, proof of how far I had come. The idea excited me, but I wasn't sure if I could take such a big step alone. That's when Hannah, Valentina's niece, stepped in. She and I had grown close over the years, sharing the same dreams for the restaurant's future. That night, Hannah and I sat for hours, talking about what we could do. "With the savings you've put aside and some of my ideas to modernize the menu and expand, we could really make this place our own," she said, her eyes full of excitement. It felt right. The restaurant had become my home, and now, I had the chance to help shape its future. So, I took the risk. I invested everything I had, and together, Hannah and I transformed Valentina's traditional Italian restaurant into a vibrant, modern dining experience. Over the next few years, our success grew, allowing us to open a second location across town. Looking around at what we had built, I often thought about my past. It had been 12 years since my mother had slapped me and thrown me out of the house. Though my family still lived in the city, we no longer had a relationship. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of my sister, Freya, on social media, but our lives were completely separate now. One afternoon, Hannah and I were in our office above the downtown location, reviewing spreadsheets and discussing future expansion. The sounds of an arriving party echoed from below. "Sounds like the engagement party's here," Hannah said, checking the schedule. 50 guests, should be a good night. We had a tradition of greeting guests personally to make them feel valued. It was something that set our restaurant apart. "I'll go check on them," I offered, putting on my blazer and pinning my name badge. As I walked onto the restaurant floor, I heard laughter and the clinking of glasses. It was a lively gathering, and large parties like this often led to repeat business. But as I approached, my smile faded. At the head of the table sat my mother, her hair now streaked with gray but still styled immaculately. Beside her was Ethan, unchanged except for the years visible on his face, and there was Freya, glowing in a sparkly dress, holding hands with a man in a sharp suit. My sister's engagement party. I froze for a moment, considering whether to turn and walk away, but before I could make a decision, my mother's eyes locked onto mine, and recognition flickered across her face. "Well, look who it is," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Our waitress for the evening." A familiar sneer twisted Ethan's face. 32 years old and still serving tables. Can't say I'm surprised. I opened my mouth to respond, but my mother cut me off. "I always knew you'd end up like this," she said. "Look at your sister, a college graduate, an economist, marrying a wonderful man, and you, still wearing a name tag and taking orders." Freya giggled, squeezing her fiancé's hand. "Maybe she'll do our dishes tonight, right, Daddy? Show us her special skills." "The floor's too clean," Ethan added. He had been drinking, and before I could react, he grabbed a plate of salad and hurled it to the floor. The sharp crash silenced the room. I felt a sting on my cheek and touched it. My fingers came away with blood. A piece of glass had nicked me. "Oops," Ethan smirked. "Better get a mop, waitress." Anger boiled inside me, but then something changed. Standing there, bleeding but unbroken, I realized these people no longer had any power over me. Their insults, their scorn, it didn't define me. I had built a life of my own, one filled with success and respect. Just as I was about to respond, Hannah's voice rang out with authority. "This situation requires immediate attention," she announced, holding a leather-bound service agreement with our restaurant's logo embossed in gold. She turned to the stunned guests. "According to our policy, any customer who engages in verbal abuse or physical assault against our staff or owners will be asked to leave immediately." She paused, then added, "Oh, and just in case you weren't aware, you're speaking to Alina Thompson, co-owner of this establishment and 3 others across the city." Silence fell over the room. My mother's eyes widened, and Ethan's smirk disappeared. The realization of where they were and who they had insulted sank in. "That's impossible," Ethan muttered. Ignoring him, Hannah continued, "In cases of assault, we reserve the right to terminate service without a refund." Then she turned to me, letting me take the lead. Straightening my blazer, I wiped the blood from my cheek and said firmly, "Clear the tables. All 80 guests need to leave, now." Our staff sprang into action, efficiently shutting down the party as my family was escorted out. I watched them go, my heart lighter than it had ever been. They had tried to break me years ago, but here I was, stronger than ever, and this time, it was on my terms.